Michael's seemingly perfect life crumbles when he discovers his wife Sarah's betrayal, shattering their family's foundation. Struggling with heartbreak and anger, he fights to protect his children and rebuild his life while navigating a bitter custody battle and the lingering presence of his wife's choices. Along the way, an unexpected connection with Lisa, a compassionate and steady presence, gives Michael a glimmer of hope. But just as life begins to stabilize, new revelations threaten to unravel everything once more. Can Michael overcome these challenges and find peace, or will his past continue to haunt him? Watch to uncover the truth. Life has a way of lulling you into routines. Some you cherish, while others make you question if this is all life has to offer. For Michael, those routines were a mix of comfort and quiet resignation. Every morning, he would rise before the rest of the house stirred, savoring the stillness. The moments before chaos set in were his sanctuary. He could reflect on his life, his choices, and the family he had worked so hard to provide for. Michael had met Sarah 12 years ago, back when they were both fresh out of college. She was the kind of woman who lit up every room she walked into, with a laugh that seemed to echo long after she was gone. He was captivated by her from the start. They married young, built a life together, and eventually had 2 kids, Emma and Jake. For Michael, they were the center of his world. Sarah had always been the planner in their relationship, the one who made sure everything ran smoothly. From school drop-offs to family vacations, she managed it all with precision. Michael was the steady presence, the one who fixed broken bikes, cooked pancakes on Saturday mornings, and made silly jokes at the dinner table. Together, they were a team, or so he thought. As the years passed, Michael started noticing small changes. Sarah, who had always been outgoing and full of energy, began retreating into herself. She spent more time on her phone, her laugh became less frequent, and she started working late more often than usual. At first, Michael dismissed it as the natural stress of life piling up. Work, kids, and the daily grind. But the distance between them grew, and Michael couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. One evening, while Michael was helping Emma with her homework at the kitchen table, Sarah walked in wearing a dress he hadn't seen before. She mentioned she was meeting some friends from work for dinner. Michael raised an eyebrow but didn't question it. Sarah deserved time to unwind, and besides, she'd always been transparent about her plans in the past. But that night, as he tucked the kids into bed and stared at the empty side of their mattress, unease began to creep in. Over the next few weeks, Sarah's behavior became harder to ignore. She started dressing up more often, something she hadn't done in years. Makeup, perfume, and late nights out became routine. Michael told himself he was being paranoid, that maybe Sarah was just trying to reclaim some part of herself she had lost in the whirlwind of motherhood and work. But deep down, a gnawing suspicion started to take root. One Friday evening, Sarah came home later than usual. Michael had waited up for her. The TV muted as he stared at the clock. When she finally walked through the door, her hair slightly tousled and her expression distant, he asked if everything was okay. She brushed him off with a quick smile and a vague excuse about a last-minute meeting running late. Michael wanted to believe her, but something in her tone made his stomach twist. The following morning, as Michael brewed his coffee, he noticed Sarah's phone sitting on the counter. It buzzed with a notification, and his eyes instinctively darted to the screen. He didn't want to invade her privacy, but the message preview was hard to ignore. "Last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you." Michael froze. His heart pounded as he stared at the screen, the words burning into his mind. When Sarah entered the kitchen moments later, cheerful and unbothered, Michael felt like the ground had shifted beneath him. He didn't confront her. Then he couldn't. Instead, he tucked the thought away, unsure of what to do next. Over the next few days, Michael tried to gather his thoughts. He began paying closer attention to Sarah's movements, her words, her habits. He noticed how she seemed glued to her phone, how her demeanor brightened after receiving certain texts, how she avoided meeting his eyes. The realization hit him like a freight train. Sarah was hiding something, and it wasn't something small. Michael decided to take a half day from work one Thursday to surprise Sarah. He told himself it was just a casual gesture, an attempt to reconnect with her. But deep down, he wanted answers. He picked up flowers on his way home, imagining the surprise and joy on her face when he walked through the door. When he arrived, the house was quiet. Too quiet. He stepped inside, the bouquet in hand, and called out for Sarah. No answer. As he walked toward the living room, he noticed her purse and keys on the counter, but no sign of her. Then he heard it, a faint laugh coming from the backyard. Michael's breath caught in his throat as he peeked through the sliding glass door. There, on the patio, was Sarah. She wasn't alone. Sitting across from her was a man Michael didn't recognize. They were leaning in close, their heads almost touching as they laughed together. The flowers slipped from his grasp, hitting the floor with a dull thud. For a moment, Michael couldn't move. He felt like he was watching someone else's life unravel, like he had stepped into a story that wasn't his own, but this was his life, his wife, his home. And now, his suspicions had turned into a devastating reality. Michael stood frozen, watching the scene before him unfold. The man leaned in closer to Sarah, his hand brushing hers as she laughed at something he said. Michael's mind raced, a torrent of emotions flooding his chest. Shock, anger, sadness. How long had this been going on? Was this why she'd been so distant lately? His grip on the sliding door's handle tightened as he fought the urge to burst outside and confront them. Instead, he stepped back, careful not to make a sound. His heart hammered as he made his way to the front door, slipping outside and sitting in his car. He stared at the dashboard. The image of Sarah smiling at another man burned into his mind. For the first time in their marriage, Michael felt like a stranger in his own life. He didn't go back inside. He drove to a nearby park, the bouquet of flowers still sitting on the passenger seat, its petals starting to wilt. Michael sat on a bench overlooking the playground, where he'd often brought Emma and Jake when they were younger. The laughter of other families in the distance felt like a cruel reminder of the happiness he thought he had. Hours passed before Michael returned home. By then, the man was gone, and Sarah was sitting at the dining table, scrolling through her phone. She glanced up as he walked in, offering him a quick smile. He didn't return it. "Where were you?" she asked casually, as if nothing had happened. "Work ran late," Michael lied, his voice tight. Sarah nodded, not pressing further. He wanted to scream, to demand answers, but something held him back. Maybe it was fear of what she might say, or fear that his family, the life he had worked so hard to build, was already slipping through his fingers. The following days were a blur. Michael threw himself into work, avoiding Sarah as much as possible. At night, he would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene in the backyard over and over again. He tried to convince himself it was innocent, maybe a co-worker or an old friend. But deep down, he knew better. One evening, as the kids were finishing their homework, Sarah announced that she was going out with some colleagues. Michael watched her from the couch as she applied lipstick in the hallway mirror. She caught his reflection and hesitated. "You okay?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. "Fine," he replied curtly, not meeting her eyes. She lingered for a moment before grabbing her purse and heading out. As soon as the door closed, Michael sprang into action. He opened Sarah's laptop, hoping to find some clue, an email, a message, anything that could confirm what he feared. But her inbox was clean, and her social media accounts offered no answers. It wasn't until he reached for her phone, charging on the kitchen counter, that he hesitated. It felt like crossing a line, but hadn't she already crossed it? Michael unlocked the phone, his hands trembling. His heart sank as he scrolled through her messages, finding a thread with a contact saved as M. The texts were casual at first, but as he scrolled further, they became unmistakably intimate. Phrases like, "Last night was incredible," and "Can't wait to see you again," stared back at him like daggers. Michael set the phone down, his chest tightening. He couldn't deny it any longer. Sarah was having an affair. That night, he waited for her to come home. When she finally walked through the door, her hair slightly disheveled and the scent of expensive cologne clinging to her clothes, Michael confronted her. "Who's M?" he asked, his voice low but steady. Sarah froze, her key slipping from her hand and clattering onto the floor. She didn't answer right away, and the silence was deafening. "Don't lie to me," Michael pressed. Tears welled up in her eyes, but they didn't soften his resolve. "Finally," she whispered, "it's not what you think." Michael laughed bitterly. "It never is it?" Their argument stretched late into the night, the kids asleep upstairs, oblivious to the storm brewing below. Sarah admitted to meeting someone, a co-worker she claimed had helped her feel alive again. Her words cut deeper than any confession of love for another man could. "Do you even realize what you've done to this family?" Michael demanded. Sarah's tears fell freely now. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she sobbed. I felt so lost, Michael. We felt so distant." Michael stared at her, his anger giving way to exhaustion. "Lost, distant. And instead of talking to me, you found someone else?" She didn't have an answer. The next few weeks were a nightmare. Michael struggled to maintain a sense of normalcy for Emma and Jake, who started to notice the tension between their parents. Sarah apologized repeatedly, claiming she wanted to fix their marriage. But Michael couldn't bring himself to trust her. Every time he looked at her, he saw her with that man, her laughter ringing in his ears like a cruel joke. Michael sought advice from friends and family, but their responses only added to his confusion. Some urged him to forgive her, to work through their problems for the sake of the kids. Others told him to cut his losses and leave. He didn't know what to do. All he knew was that he couldn't keep living like this. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, Michael found himself sitting in the darkened living room, scrolling through his phone. He stumbled upon an old photo of their family at the beach, all of them smiling, sun-kissed, and happy. It felt like another lifetime. Sarah walked in, hesitating in the doorway. "Michael," she said softly, "can we talk?" He looked up at her, his expression unreadable. "What's there to talk about?" "I made a mistake," she began, her voice trembling. "But I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose our family." Michael sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Sarah. You didn't just hurt me. You broke something in us, in this family." Her tears fell again, but he didn't move to comfort her. That night, Michael made a decision he wouldn't rush into anything, but he also wouldn't let himself be dragged down by the weight of her betrayal. The story wasn't over, but for Michael, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one where he would prioritize his own healing and his role as a father. Remember to like, share, and comment your thoughts on this story. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. Michael couldn't sleep. The house felt like a stranger to him now. Every corner, every photograph on the wall, every creak in the floorboards seemed to mock him. Sarah's betrayal loomed large in his mind, an unwelcome intruder that refused to leave. He lay on the couch, staring at the dark ceiling, replaying their argument over and over again. It was in the stillness of that night that Michael decided he needed answers. Answers Sarah wasn't willing to give, He needed to know how deep her betrayal went, not just for himself, but for the sake of understanding what kind of future, if any, they could have. The next morning, while Sarah took the kids to school, Michael called his friend Kevin, someone he trusted implicitly. Kevin worked as a private investigator and had helped people in situations like this. Before Michael hesitated as he dialed the number, his hands trembling. "Kevin, it's me," he said when his friend picked up. "Mike? Hey, long time? What's going on?" Kevin's tone was cheerful, but it shifted when he heard the tension in Michael's voice. "I need your help. It's about Sarah," Michael said, swallowing the lump in his throat. He quickly explained the situation, the texts, the late nights, and the man in the backyard. Kevin didn't hesitate. "Say no more. I'll look into it. Just give me a couple of days." Michael thanked him and hung up, a strange mix of relief and dread settling in his chest. He wasn't sure he was ready for whatever Kevin might find, but he knew he couldn't keep living in limbo. Over the next few days, Michael threw himself into work and parenting, trying to distract himself from the storm brewing beneath the surface. He made extra effort to spend time with Emma and Jake, helping them with homework and taking them to the park. He wanted to shield them from the tension at home as much as possible. Then, Kevin called. "Mike, I've got something," Kevin said, his voice serious. "Can you meet me?" Michael's stomach churned, but he agreed. They met at a quiet coffee shop on the outskirts of town. Kevin slid an envelope across the table, his expression unreadable. "It's all in there," he said. "I'm sorry, Mike." Michael's hands shook as he opened the envelope. Inside were photographs of Sarah with the man from the backyard. They were taken at a restaurant, walking through a park, and, most damning of all, entering a motel. Michael's world crumbled around him as he stared at the evidence. "Who is he?" Michael asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "His name's Greg. He works with Sarah." "From what I can tell, this has been going on for months," Kevin said, his tone filled with sympathy. Michael clenched his fists, anger bubbling to the surface. "Months," he repeated, the word tasting bitter on his tongue. Kevin placed a hand on Michael's shoulder. "You don't have to decide anything right now. Take your time." Michael nodded, but his mind was already racing. He thanked Kevin and left the coffee shop, the envelope tucked under his arm like a weight he couldn't shake. That evening, Michael confronted Sarah. He didn't wait for the kids to go to bed this time. He didn't care. He walked into the living room, holding the envelope, and tossed it onto the coffee table in front of her. "Open it," he said, his voice cold. Sarah hesitated, her face pale. When she finally opened the envelope and saw the photos, her hand flew to her mouth. "Michael, I can explain," she began, but he cut her off. "Explain that you've been lying to me for months, that you've been sneaking around with him while I was here, taking care of our kids, trusting you." His voice rose with each word, his anger spilling out like a dam breaking. "I never meant for it to go this far," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. "It was a mistake." "A mistake?" Michael shouted. "You don't accidentally carry on an affair for months, Sarah. You made a choice over and over again." The kids peeked around the corner, their wide eyes filled with fear. Michael softened when he saw them, lowering his voice. "Go to your rooms," he said gently. Emma and Jake hesitated but eventually obeyed. Once they were out of earshot, Michael turned back to Sarah. "I want you out of this house," he said, his voice firm. "Tonight." "Michael, please," she begged. "We can fix this. I'll do whatever it takes." "You've already done enough," he replied. "I need you to leave." Sarah packed a bag and left that night. As the door closed behind her, Michael felt a strange mix of relief and heartbreak. He had stood up for himself, but the reality of his broken family weighed heavily on him. In the days that followed, Michael focused on his kids. He explained the situation to them as gently as he could, emphasizing that none of it was their fault. Emma cried, and Jake retreated into silence, but Michael promised them he would always be there for them. Meanwhile, Sarah called and texted constantly. Begging for another chance, Michael ignored her. He needed time to think, to process everything that had happened. He began researching divorce laws and meeting with a lawyer, determined to protect himself and his children. But then, something unexpected happened. One afternoon, while picking the kids up from school, Michael ran into an old friend, Lisa. They hadn't seen each other in years, but they fell into an easy conversation. Lisa had gone through a divorce herself and offered a sympathetic ear. They exchanged numbers, promising to catch up soon. Over the next few weeks, Michael and Lisa began talking regularly. Their conversations were light at first, but as they grew closer, Michael found himself opening up about his struggles. Lisa's support and understanding were a balm to his wounded heart. For the first time in months, Michael felt like he could breathe again. Reminder: if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like, comment, and share your thoughts below. And if you want more stories like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Michael thought the worst was behind him, but life had a way of testing his strength. As the weeks turned into months, he worked tirelessly to rebuild his life. He poured his energy into his children, his job, and the budding friendship with Lisa. But Sarah's presence still loomed like a shadow. She continued to call, text, and even showed up unannounced, pleading for reconciliation. Each encounter chipped away at Michael's resolve. One evening, while Michael was helping Emma with her science project, his phone buzzed with an incoming text. It was from Sarah. "We need to talk. It's about the kids." He stared at the message, his jaw tightening. It was always about the kids. Reluctantly, he agreed to meet her the next day at a local coffee shop. When he arrived, Sarah was already seated, her expression a mix of regret and desperation. Michael sat across from her, keeping his distance. "What is it?" he asked, his tone sharp. She hesitated, her hands fidgeting with the edge of her coffee cup. "I want to come home," she said finally. "For the kids. They miss having us together, Michael. We can't keep doing this to them." Michael laughed bitterly. "You're not doing this for the kids, Sarah. You're doing it for yourself." Her eyes filled with tears. "I made a mistake, Michael. I've been trying to fix it, but you won't even give me a chance." "You made a choice," he said, his voice rising. "And now you want to undo it like it never happened. That's not how this works." The other patrons turned to look, but Michael didn't care. He was done pretending everything was fine. Sarah's tone shifted. "I'll fight for custody if I have to." Michael's heart sank. He hadn't expected this. "You're going to drag our kids into this?" he asked, his voice shaking. "After everything you've already put them through?" Sarah's silence was answer enough. She grabbed her bag and stormed out, leaving Michael sitting there, his anger replaced by a deep sense of dread. The custody battle was a turning point. Sarah hired an aggressive lawyer, determined to paint Michael as an unfit parent. She dug up every minor argument, every moment of frustration, and twisted it into evidence against him. Michael felt like he was fighting for his very identity, not just as a father, but as a man. Lisa became his anchor during this time, offering him advice and encouragement. "You're stronger than this," she told him one night as they sat in her living room. "Don't let her take what matters most to you." Her words stuck with him. Michael threw himself into preparing his case, gathering testimonials from teachers, neighbors, and even his boss to prove his dedication to his children. He refused to let Sarah's betrayal rob him of the one thing that still gave his life meaning. Then came the court hearing. The tension in the courtroom was palpable, as both sides presented their arguments. Sarah's lawyer painted a picture of a man too consumed by anger to be a stable parent, while Michael's lawyer countered with evidence of his unwavering commitment to his kids. The pivotal moment came when Emma and Jake were called to testify. Michael's heart broke as he watched his children take the stand, their young faces pale with fear. Emma spoke first, her voice trembling as she described how much she loved both her parents, but wished the fighting would stop. Jake, younger and more hesitant, simply said, "I just want Dad to be happy." Their words cut through the noise of the courtroom, silencing the arguments and legal jargon. For a moment, everything became clear. In the end, the judge ruled in Michael's favor, granting him primary custody while allowing Sarah visitation rights. It wasn't a victory in the traditional sense. There were no winners in this battle, but it was a step toward stability. Sarah's reaction was explosive. She confronted Michael outside the courthouse, her anger boiling over. "You think this is over?" she spat. "I'll never stop fighting." Michael didn't respond. He simply walked away, holding Emma and Jake's hands tightly. Back home, the weight of the ordeal began to lift. Michael knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he was determined to create a safe and loving environment for his children. Lisa's presence in his life became more significant, their bond deepening as they navigated their respective struggles together. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Michael invited Lisa over for dinner. As they sat on the couch, sharing a bottle of wine, he finally opened up about the fears that had plagued him throughout the custody battle. "I was so afraid of losing them," he admitted, his voice breaking. "They're all I have left." Lisa placed her hand on his, her gaze steady. "You're not alone, Michael. You've got me, and you'll always have them." Her words brought a sense of peace he hadn't felt in months. For the first time in a long time, Michael allowed himself to hope for a brighter future. But just as things seemed to be settling down, a new twist emerged one evening. As Michael was cleaning up after dinner, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. He opened it and froze. "I think you should know the full truth about Sarah and Greg. Call me." The message was followed by a phone number. Michael hesitated, his mind racing. Was this someone trying to stir up more drama, or was there something he didn't know? Against his better judgment, he dialed the number. The voice on the other end belonged to a woman who introduced herself as Greg's ex-girlfriend. She explained that Greg had a history of manipulation and had likely been using Sarah for his own gain. "He's done this before," she said. "He targets vulnerable women and strings them along until he gets bored." Michael's stomach turned as she detailed Greg's pattern of behavior. He wasn't sure what to do with this information, but one thing was clear. Sarah had been caught in something far more toxic than he had realized. When Michael confronted Sarah about Greg, she broke down completely. She admitted that the affair had spiraled out of her control, and that Greg had been emotionally abusive toward her. For the first time, Michael saw her not as the woman who had betrayed him, but as someone who had been deeply hurt herself. It was a turning point, not for their relationship, but for their ability to co-parent. Michael realized that holding on to anger wouldn't help him or his children. He didn't forgive Sarah, but he chose to let go of the bitterness that had consumed him. The story's climax came when Michael decided to take a bold step forward in his own life. He asked Lisa to officially be a part of it, not just as a friend, but as a partner. Over a quiet dinner, he told her, "You've been my rock through all of this. I don't know where I'd be without you. I want us to take this next step together." Lisa smiled, her eyes glistening with tears. "I'd like that," she said. Their relationship blossomed, built on trust, mutual respect, and a shared commitment to creating a loving environment for their families. Michael found himself looking forward to the future again, no longer defined by the pain of his past. Reminder: if you've been captivated by this story, be sure to like, comment, and share your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe for more heartfelt and inspiring stories. Michael's life had finally found a rhythm, but even as things settled, The tension between the past and the future lingered. The custody battle had ended, and Sarah seemed resigned to her new role in their fractured family. Yet, her lingering presence and the shadows of their history threatened to derail Michael's progress. One evening, as Michael sat with Lisa at the park watching Emma and Jake play, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Sarah. "We need to talk. I've been thinking about everything, and I need closure." Michael sighed. His chest tightening, Lisa noticed and gave him a questioning look. "It's Sarah," he explained. "She wants to talk." Lisa nodded, her expression calm but supportive. "If you need to do this, I understand," she said. "Just remember, you don't owe her anything." Michael appreciated her words, but a part of him knew he couldn't ignore Sarah's request. The next day, he met her at a diner they used to frequent during happier times. The place was eerily familiar, its worn booths and faint smell of coffee pulling at his memories. Sarah was already seated, her hands clasped tightly around a mug of tea. She looked tired, as though the weight of their shared past had aged her overnight. "Thanks for meeting me," she said softly. Michael nodded but didn't say anything, waiting for her to begin. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "Not just for the affair, but for everything, for the distance, for shutting you out, for taking what we had and throwing it away." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, Michael didn't know how to respond. "I appreciate that," he said finally. "But Sarah, I can't pretend that an apology fixes everything. You didn't just hurt me. You hurt our kids. You broke the trust that held our family together." Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded. "I know I hate myself for what I did, but Greg, he wasn't what I thought he was. I made a mistake, and I paid for it." Michael frowned. "What do you mean?" Sarah hesitated, then took a deep breath. Greg was controlling. "At first, it felt exciting. He made me feel seen in a way I hadn't in years, but it didn't take long for that to change. He started isolating me, making me question everything. By the time I realized what was happening, I didn't know how to get out." Michael felt a pang of sympathy, but he quickly pushed it aside. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I don't want this to define us," she said. "I don't want my mistakes to be the only thing our kids remember. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Michael. I just want to find a way to co-parent without all this anger." Michael leaned back in his seat, her words stirring a conflict within him. He still felt the sting of betrayal, but he also saw the truth in her eyes. Sarah had made her choices, but she wasn't the same person who had walked out of their home months ago. "I don't know if we'll ever get to a place where things feel normal," he said honestly, "but for the kids' sake, I'll try." It wasn't the resolution Sarah had hoped for, but it was a start. In the weeks that followed, Michael worked on rebuilding the boundaries of their co-parenting relationship. He made it clear to Sarah that while he was willing to communicate for the sake of Emma and Jake, their personal relationship was over. Sarah respected his decision, focusing her energy on being a better mother. Meanwhile, Michael and Lisa's relationship continued to grow. Lisa became a constant presence in his life, not just as a partner, but as a friend to Emma and Jake. The kids adored her, and Michael found himself imagining a future with her that felt both steady and full of possibility. But just as things seemed to be falling into place, life threw another curveball. One evening, as Michael was tucking Jake into bed, his son looked up at him with wide, tearful eyes. "Dad," he said, his voice trembling, "do you and Mom hate each other?" Michael's heart sank. "No, buddy, I don't hate your mom." "Then why can't we all live together again?" Jake asked, his voice breaking. Michael sat on the edge of the bed, struggling to find the right words. "Sometimes, grown-ups make mistakes," he said gently. and those mistakes can make it hard for them to stay together. But it doesn't mean we don't both love you and Emma with all our hearts." Jake nodded, but Michael could see the sadness in his eyes. It was a reminder of the scars their family's struggles had left behind. The next day, Michael called Lisa to talk about what Jake had said. She listened patiently, her calm voice reassuring him. "You're doing everything you can, Michael," she said. "The fact that Jake feels safe enough to share this with you says a lot. Just keep being there for them." Her words gave him strength, but they also fueled his determination to create a new sense of stability for his family. Michael decided to organize a family day, a chance for Emma and Jake to see that while their parents might not be together, they could still come together for them. He invited Sarah to join them at the zoo, making it clear that this was for the kids' benefit. The day was a tentative success. Emma and Jake beamed as they watched the giraffes and fed the goats at the petting zoo. Michael and Sarah kept their interactions polite but distant, focusing on the kids. Lisa, understanding the importance of this moment, stayed behind, encouraging Michael to take this step. By the end of the day, Emma hugged Michael tightly. "I had so much fun, Dad. Can we do this again?" Michael smiled, his heart swelling with a mix of pride and hope. "We'll see, sweetheart." As they drove home, Michael realized that while his family might never look the same as it once did, there was still a chance to build something new, a future defined not by the pain of the past, but by the love they shared. Reminder: don't forget to like, comment, and share your thoughts. And if you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button for more heartfelt recaps and inspiring stories. Michael's efforts to create a sense of balance between his fractured family and his evolving relationship with Lisa were paying off. For a while, it seemed like the worst was behind him. Sarah appeared committed to being a better co-parent. Emma and Jake were adjusting to the new normal, and Lisa's steady presence brought him peace. But life wasn't done testing him just yet. One afternoon, while Michael was picking up the kids from school, his phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "You need to know what Sarah's planning, call me." Michael's heart sank. It wasn't the first time someone had reached out about Sarah, but the cryptic tone of the message felt different. He glanced at the kids through the rearview mirror. They were chatting about their day, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. Later that evening, after the kids were asleep, Michael stepped out onto the back deck, phone in hand. He hesitated for a moment before dialing the number a woman answered almost immediately. "Michael?" she asked. Her voice was shaky, and she sounded as if she had been crying. "Yes. Who is this?" he asked cautiously. "My name is Karen. I used to work with Sarah," she began. "I don't want to cause trouble, but I thought you should know. She's been talking about taking the kids and moving away." Michael's chest tightened. "What are you talking about? She wouldn't do that." Karen sighed. "I overheard her telling Greg, yes, she's still in contact with him, that she was considering leaving town for a fresh start. She said she's tired of the co-parenting arrangement and wants a clean slate." The words hit Michael like a ton of bricks. Sarah had always been impulsive, but this was a step beyond anything he could have imagined. "Do you have proof of this?" he asked, his voice shaking. "I don't," Karen admitted, "but I thought you should know before it's too late." Michael thanked her and hung up, his mind racing. Was Karen telling the truth, or was this another attempt to stir up drama? He couldn't afford to ignore the warning, but he also didn't want to act rashly. The next morning, Michael called his lawyer to discuss his options. The lawyer advised him to document everything and keep a close eye on Sarah's behavior. If there was any indication that she might follow through, Michael needed to act quickly. Days passed, and Michael found himself hyper-aware of Sarah's every move. She seemed more distant than usual, her interactions with the kids tinged with an almost desperate energy. It was as if she were trying to soak up every moment with them. One Friday evening, as Michael was dropping Emma and Jake off at Sarah's for the weekend, He noticed a stack of moving boxes in the corner of her living room. His pulse quickened. "What's with the boxes?" he asked casually. Sarah hesitated, then forced a smile. "Oh, just decluttering," she said. "Trying to get rid of some old stuff." Michael didn't buy it, but he didn't press her. Instead, he made a mental note to check in with Karen and see if she had heard anything new. That night, Michael struggled to sleep. The thought of losing his kids gnawed at him, and he couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah was hiding something. He called Lisa, who listened patiently as he voiced his fears. "You need to confront her," Lisa said firmly. "You can't wait for her to make the first move." Michael knew she was right. The next day, he drove to Sarah's house, determined to get answers. When she opened the door, her expression shifted from surprise to irritation. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "We need to talk," Michael said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Sarah crossed her arms. "About what?" Michael pointed to the moving boxes. "About those, and about what I've been hearing." Sarah's face paled. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb, Sarah. Are you planning to take the kids and leave?" Her silence was deafening. Finally, she sighed and sank onto the couch. "I've thought about it," she admitted, "but I haven't made any decisions." Michael's anger flared. "You don't get to make that decision, Sarah. They're not just your kids. They're ours. You can't just uproot their lives because you feel like it." "I'm their mother," Sarah shot back, her voice rising. "I know what's best for them." "And I'm their father," Michael said firmly, "and I'll fight you with everything I've got if you try to take them away." The tension between them was palpable, but Michael refused to back down. Sarah eventually relented, promising that she wouldn't make any moves without discussing it with him first. But Michael knew better than to take her at her word. That night, he met with his lawyer to file an emergency custody order, ensuring that Sarah couldn't leave the state with the kids without his permission. It was a drastic step, but one he felt was necessary to protect his family. The following weeks were a blur of legal proceedings and heightened tension. Sarah was furious about the custody order, accusing Michael of trying to control her. Michael, in turn, felt betrayed by her willingness to put her own desires above the well-being of their children. The climax came during a court-ordered mediation session. Michael and Sarah sat across from each other, their lawyers by their sides, as a mediator tried to help them find common ground. "I just want what's best for Emma and Jake," Michael said, his voice steady. "And what's best is stability. They need both of us in their lives, but they also need consistency." Sarah looked down at her hands, her facade of anger cracking. "I thought leaving would give me a fresh start," she admitted. "But you're right, uprooting them isn't fair." It was a small victory, but a significant one. For the first time in months, Michael felt a glimmer of hope that they could move forward, not as a couple, but as co-parents working toward a common goal. As the session ended, Sarah approached Michael. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "for everything." Michael nodded. "I appreciate that. But this isn't about us anymore. It's about them." With the custody battle resolved and the threat of Sarah leaving behind them, Michael finally felt a sense of closure. He returned home that evening, exhausted but relieved, and found Lisa waiting for him with a warm smile and a comforting embrace. "You did it," she said softly. "We did it," Michael replied, realizing just how much her support had meant throughout the ordeal. As they sat together, watching Emma and Jake play in the yard, Michael felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. The road had been long and painful, but he knew he was finally on the path to healing. Reminder: if you're invested in Michael's journey, don't forget to like, comment, and share your thoughts below. And be sure to subscribe for more compelling stories like this. Michael's journey had been a storm of heartbreak, confrontation, and unexpected growth. But as the dust settled from the whirlwind of the past year, he finally found himself in a place of peace, a place where he could focus on the life he was rebuilding with his kids, and perhaps even himself. Sarah's attempt to relocate with the children had been the final trial. Through their heated legal battle and tense mediations, Michael had learned something important. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, and letting go of bitterness didn't mean letting someone back into his life. After mediation, Sarah committed to co-parenting without further disruptions, acknowledging that Michael had every right to protect his children and their shared family structure. Their relationship remained distant but cooperative, united only by their love for Emma and Jake. One Saturday morning, Michael and Lisa stood side by side in his kitchen, preparing breakfast as the kids colored at the dining table. The air was filled with the smell of pancakes and the sound of laughter, something Michael had once feared he'd never hear again. He glanced at Lisa as she poured batter into the skillet, her calm presence grounding him. She caught him looking and smiled. "What?" she asked, playfully brushing flour off her hand. "Nothing," Michael replied, shaking his head. "Just thank you for everything." Lisa tilted her head, her eyes softening. "You don't have to thank me, Michael. We're a team." It was a simple statement, but one that meant the world to him. For so long, Michael had felt like he was fighting his battles alone. Now, with Lisa by his side, he no longer carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. Later that day, as they walked to the park with the kids, Emma and Jake raced ahead, their laughter echoing in the crisp autumn air. Michael and Lisa followed at a leisurely pace, their hands brushing as they walked. "I've been thinking," Michael began, "about the future, about us." Lisa looked at him curiously. "And?" "I want to take the next step," he said, his voice steady, "not just for me, but for the kids. They adore you, Lisa, and so do I. I think we're ready to make this official." Lisa's face lit up, and she reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "Michael, I'd love that." As the weeks turned into months, their relationship blossomed further. Lisa moved in, and together, they created a home filled with love, trust, and stability. Things that had been missing from Michael's life for far too long. Emma and Jake adjusted seamlessly, their bond with Lisa growing stronger by the day. Even Sarah seemed to find her footing. She apologized to Michael again during a rare moment of vulnerability, expressing regret for the pain she'd caused. While Michael couldn't forget what she had done, he could see that she was trying to be a better person. Not for him, but for their kids. It was enough. One evening, as Michael sat on the back deck watching the sunset, Emma came outside and climbed onto his lap. She rested her head on his shoulder, her tiny frame fitting perfectly against his. "Are you happy, Dad?" she asked softly. Michael kissed the top of her head, his heart swelling with love. "I am, sweetheart, are you?" Emma nodded. "I like Lisa. She makes you smile." Michael chuckled. "She makes me happy too." It was in that moment that Michael realized just how far he'd come. The man who had once been consumed by betrayal and anger had found his way to a brighter future. He had rebuilt his life piece by piece, and though the journey had been painful, it had also been transformative. The final chapter of Michael's story wasn't just about finding love again. It was about rediscovering himself. He learned to value his own strength, to trust in his ability to provide for his children, and to let go of the pain that had once defined him. Through Lisa's support, his children's resilience, and his own determination, Michael had created a life that was better than he had ever imagined.